If you are living and breathing, and I'm gonna bet if you clicked on this video, you have probably struggled with imposter syndrome on some level. I know I have. So I was very intrigued when I saw this Instagram post from Todd Herman that essentially says, imposter syndrome doesn't exist. So is he right? What about this feeling of inferiority? What do we do with it? Well, keep watching to find out. But before we start talking about if it's real or not, let's talk about how imposter syndrome came to be used as a term. Don't worry, this isn't gonna be a whole history lesson. This is like 30 seconds. So in 1978, two women coined the term imposter syndrome, discussing about how women were returning to the workforce and then feeling like failures as mothers at home. It was like that, I'm an imposter at work, or I feel like an imposter at home, because they're kind of doing these two different roles. That sort of then morphed into what I remember imposter syndrome being in the late 90s, early 2000s. I feel like a fraud, or like I don't deserve the success I've been given. I remember Oprah talking about this a lot, that when she had her syndicated talk show and she had all this money, I mean, she still has all this money, but when she was rising to fame and really became famous, feeling like, when are they gonna find me out? Right? And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with on some level. But what Todd argues in the Instagram post is that around 2010, as content creation became really huge and there were all these influencers and content creators, etc., we started to feel really inferior about our lives, and they started feeling inferior about theirs, essentially. And so started using the term imposter syndrome to discuss like why we don't feel like we measure up to these beautiful lives we see online. Basically, people started to feel insecure about posturing, and people started to feel insecure about their everyday lives because it didn't measure up to what they saw or the people they were comparing themselves with. And to me, really, imposter syndrome is a lot about comparison. But I did like Todd's 3 versions of what we're really feeling instead of imposter syndrome. Todd Herman's thing is, he's saying it's really one of 3 problems. Number 1 is, you're not an imposter, you're a beginner. You suck at something and you need to get better. Oh, and I'm just gonna go through all 3 first, and then we'll come back around and talk about like, hey, what do I do if I feel one of these ways? So the second one is, you are good at what you do, you just don't believe in yourself. And that's really just lacking confidence. And I think this is the one we hear about a lot when celebrities talk about it, and I use the word celebrity, but I mean anyone well-known, like authors, speakers, etc., on top of like TV and movie celebrities, music celebrities. When they're talking about imposter syndrome, a lot of times I think they're talking about this one. It's really just a lack of confidence, and this is the one where I think comparison sneaks in and we start to go, oh, I thought I was good, but then that person over there had a really great idea, and why didn't I come up with that? And then we compare ourselves to them, and so we lack confidence. Hence, we start saying imposter syndrome. And then third, and this one I was like, yes, Todd, yes. It's not that people are imposters, it's that some people aren't honest about their capabilities. And so you're not an imposter, you're a liar. Okay, so this third one, this is the one that really bothers me. We're not gonna stay here long, just hang with me for a minute. We're not gonna stay in the negative too long, but let's talk about it. I love that he brought this up of like, you're a liar. Like, I think especially in the online entrepreneur space, which I know isn't where a lot of you are who are watching my videos, but in that space in particular, there's a lot of talk of like, oh, you just need to be one step ahead of your client, which like technically true, but you don't have great capabilities then. You can take them this step and go back and teach it, or people learn one thing, turn around and teach it, instead of having a wealth of knowledge. This was actually my problem back in the early 2000s, or like 2010s. I knew I wanted a career coach, and this was right around the time where the word brand was becoming popular, and people were just throwing themselves out online being like, oh, I'm a marketing expert, I'm a branding expert, I'm a career coach, with no backing, no experience whatsoever. And then we wonder, so people still do that, and then we wonder why they feel insecure. Well, because they have nothing to prove they're capable. This is why when I wanted a career coach, I went, I'm gonna go work at a college first because they have career centers and I can get my feet wet and I can learn and grow there before I start calling myself any sort of expert, etc. in this path. So anyway, those are the 3 categories. Here's my thought. These 3 categories make sense whether you want to label them imposter syndrome or not. And the thing is, we've let this feeling of inadequacy, this imposter syndrome, or one of these 3 categories, whichever you want to call it, we've let this feeling of inadequacy hold ourselves back instead of trying to work through it. So here's what I think about how you can deal with it. So first, be honest with yourself and what category you are in. Are you a beginner? Are you just lacking self-confidence? Or are we kind of not being honest about our capabilities? I'm not gonna call you a liar, but time to start getting truthful with yourself on your capabilities. I mean, technically, if you're not being truthful, that is lying, but we're gonna move past that now, right? If you are in that 3rd category where you're like, I've been calling myself an expert and I've been working in this area for a year, we're probably not an expert. Just be real about that and now recategorize yourself as a beginner or wherever kind of level you fall. So first, get more practice, put in more reps. Every time you do an action related towards that identity, you are solidifying that identity in yourself. So I can say I'm a runner, but I'll feel like an imposter because I never run. But if tomorrow I run 10 minutes and the next day I run 15 and I keep running and after 6 months I'm running every day, then I'm like, yeah, I'm a runner. I run every day. Right? Same thing. If you want to be a social media manager, can you pick an account and work on that account every day and track your data, track your analytics? Is it growing? Well, then you can say, I'm a social media manager. I've managed a social account. Even if it was for a friend, even if it was for your dog, you're doing the work to be able to take on that identity and say it with confidence. So put in more reps. And with this step, don't be afraid to fail, make mistakes. That's how we grow, right? I actually think one of the ways that people don't feel like an imposter anymore is when they go from that point in their career where they say, oh, I've seen it all. Like where they've gone through all these crazy setbacks, problems you never imagined, etc. Now granted, there's always something new that can come up, but when they're like, oh, you wouldn't believe what I've seen, they've got some experience to let them know they're not an imposter, they are the identity they call themselves. So then with that practice, stack and store your wins. Take stock of what you've done in this area where you feel imposter syndrome, whatever. Wherever you're feeling inferior, take stock of your wins in that area. This is why I love to keep a wins file in my emails, where anytime somebody writes me and says, thank you, I got a job because of you, or thank you, your videos helped my job search, I put them there and remember like, oh yeah, I'm actually helping people. Okay, this is good. So do the same thing for yourself. Another thing you can do to stack and store your wins is track those reps that you're putting in, right? If you're going to the gym every day, sometimes we forget what we're doing. If you're trying to become to yourself a healthy person, because it doesn't always have to deal with career, right? And you go to the gym every day, but you don't write it down. Sometimes you forget, like, oh my gosh, I now go to the gym every day. And last year I went, I think 5 times all year. So start tracking how many times you're going to the gym. Or if you want to become a writer, if you're writing 1 sentence a day, look at those pages you've written or track how many sentences you wrote all week long. Stack and store the wins so that you can see the progress and you can reflect back on it. By stacking your wins, this should also build momentum that you want to keep going, that you sit there and go, okay, who can I help next? Or, okay, how many sentences can I write today? And that is going to, again, reinforce that identity and take away that feeling of imposterdom. I really like calling it imposterdom. Inferiority, it's the same. And another suggestion, and this one comes from Todd, is to validate your identity. So sometimes we sit there and go, I'm not good at my job, or like, I'm not everything people say I'm cracked up to be, or I'm not the healthy person people say. And this is a subtle difference from the one we just did, but this is where you need to think about Why can you manage a team? Why can you call yourself a healthy person? And reflect back and say things like, I spent 6 years getting a degree and learning everything I can to now be in this role. Or I deserve to be considered for the promotion because I already have a really good rapport with everyone on the team, and I've already taken on the leadership role in at least 3 projects this year. So remind yourself of like what experiences you have that make you qualified to be whatever it is you say you can be. And if you can't validate, that's okay. Now, do a gut check that you're not underselling yourself, because that's something I see a lot. That's why I like this one about validating. Like, really think through, oh yeah, I have managed people before, or I have a degree in this thing. I have knowledge, or I've worked at this company 10 years. I have institutional knowledge that makes me qualified. Whatever the situation is, really try and validate. But if you do that gut check and realize you're not underselling, you don't really have much to validate your true identity in your career or whatever this thing is that you're struggling with imposter syndrome, that's all right. That just means we need more practice. And if comparison is really the issue, and I'll be honest, I think this is the one that most people struggle with and I've struggled with, there is nothing wrong with stopping following people who make you feel inferior. Some people I think like to feel like, oh, I don't want to act like those people have power over me. Well, people have influence. And if they're distracting you from getting ahead in your career, getting ahead with whatever it is you're trying to overcome here, like, you don't have to follow them. You don't have to read their books or listen to their podcasts or whatever it is. Even if it's a coworker that is kind of making you feel inferior in your job, take a look at their life and yours, number one, and compare a little bit that way of like, where am I maybe putting them on too high a pedestal? But then also, you don't have to make that coworker your best friend. You don't have to be on every project with them. Take away as much as the ability to compare as possible. Okay, so what about you? How do you combat feelings of inadequacy? Let me know in the comments. Let's help each other out. If you have something you've done that's helped in this area, leave it below, and I hope this video helped. If this one helped, go watch this one next, and I'll see you over there. Bye.